We got
Welcome,
it
Dr.
done.
Perlmutter. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing, Donna?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for joining.
I am delighted. I want to tell you, I know we're going to be talking about a few things today, but most importantly, we're going to be talking about this right here. I think it's going to be backwards. That's the way it is on Instagram Live. Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. And I have to tell you, truth be known, I get a lot of books to read for people that would like, as you know, a supportive comment. Most of the time I do them. Occasionally there's a message that doesn't really resonate with my messaging, so I defer. But your book it really gets to everyone's heart, and it got to my heart. And I think, I don't know, we're jumping right here, just jumping right in. I want your viewers to know that, we're all doing the best we can. And you might look at Tana Amen and say, this is a person who's just got it all going on, and through her entire life must just have been a joyride. And, we've all had stuff that we've had to work through. And some people maybe don't work through it. But when you describe the challenges that you experienced, which were multifaceted, emotional things, health challenges, that's for sure, and how the world sort of seemed like it was conspiring to knock you down. And then I love what you say here: persistence, grit, and faith. You tap into to grit and faith persistently and bring about this incredible person who you are today that I love deeply, as I've known you and your husband for years. And I'm proud of all that you do. I'm proud of what you've taken, this adversity, what you've done, yes, for yourself, but what you do moving forward and how you've moved forward with it and your husband, and also in writing this book. So I am just thrilled for you, thrilled to know you, thrilled for your book.
I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Perlmutter. You have no idea. When I got your endorsement, it literally brought tears to my eyes. I mean, it was so incredible. You actually read the book, and you were just so kind about it. And we're friends now, but you don't even know this. I followed you for years before we became friends. So I have these mentors. People don't need to know that you're following them to be your mentor, right? And so I used to follow you because I was so impressed and just so hungry to learn about the effects of how certain foods and how trauma and how all these different things affected stress, affected our brain function. So, you and Dr. Hyman are two of my primary mentors, I would say. And I just am so grateful to you. And so the endorsement was just so heartfelt. And I just, thank you. Thank you for being here.
I'm happy to do it. You bring up a very interesting topic. And that is, what is stress doing to us? What are previous traumas doing to us today? Well, certainly they inform our perception of the world around us. But beyond that, I think that they actually have a role to play in our decision making, which is really quite profound. We can look at the actual brain hardware. Who knows more about brain hardware and wiring than your husband? We can actually look at the areas of the brain that are involved in decision making, like the amygdala, which really tends to set the stage for us to make decisions that are not thought through, that are mostly self-centered, that are not involving the outcome variabilities in other people and even in the planet. Or we tap into the prefrontal cortex that allows more measured response, the concept of others, the concept of empathy, the concepts of gratitude and of giving back. Those are disparate areas of the brain that communicate. We know that this prefrontal cortex keeps the amygdala under control. And who knew that the amplification of the amygdala, our aggressive narcissistic decision-making, can be brought on by early life trauma, but can be reversed later in life, that we can rewire, reconnect more aggressively to the better part of the brain that allows us to share in the feelings of others, to make decisions that are long-term thinking, like for our health, in other words, the foods we eat, the exercise we get, sleep, etc. And importantly, so importantly, the value of our lifestyle choices in bringing about that change in wiring. In other words, How that works against us is, as an example, let's say you get a crappy night's sleep. The very next day, your amygdala is 60% more active, your
Oh, wow.
decision making is poor, you're eating the wrong foods, you're not going to exercise, and everything just goes down the tubes. If you do get a good night's sleep, you're tapping more into the prefrontal cortex, allowing you to make better decisions for you and for others. How else can we tap into the prefrontal cortex aside from getting a good night's sleep? Eating a lower inflammatory diet, exposing ourselves to nature, meditating. All of these things have been demonstrated to light up that prefrontal cortex and allowing us to be really more enlightened about ourselves, which is a good thing. We all want to do that. But I think these days, more along the lines as well of seeing other people's viewpoints, the idea of emotional empathy and cognitive empathy, being able to share in the feelings of others, and also cognitive empathy, being able to share or participate in the viewpoints of other people. These days, we need that. We need to recognize that people have other points of view that we may not embrace, but nonetheless, let's try it on. Let's see what it's like to walk that mile in somebody else's shoes and see what their viewpoint looks like, as opposed to deeply entrenching ourselves in one specific way that it is, to the perfect exclusion of anything else that in some way contrasts with who we are. It's so important that we be able to modify our dogma as we move forward in life. You know, I was did an interview earlier this morning, and we were talking actually about this topic, and I said, 20 years ago in the books I was writing, it was all about no fat or low fat, and that was what the science told us. We now know that science wasn't exactly neutral in terms of its underpinning, and we now simply embrace fat as being good for us. My point being that it's really helpful to really walk in the other person's shoes and see what it's like.
Oh boy, was that important for me. I know I actually start my book off with that story about, that's where the title of my book comes from. So The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child was really an epiphany I had when I was being very harshly judgmental towards a group of people who happened to be recovering addicts. And it was because of my own pain from childhood. I mean, a lot of times our judgments come from, the pain we go through in childhood. My uncle being a heroin addict, my other uncle being murdered in a drug deal gone wrong, lots of addiction in my family. So I just didn't have a lot of tolerance and didn't even realize it. But I'm on stage and all of a sudden I realize, what am I going to teach these people? How am I going to talk to them about gluten and dairy when I think they're still jonesing for a pipe or a needle?
It's a beautiful description. I mean, we are right there, either on stage or at least in the audience while you're giving that description, and the anxiety that came over you, and finally this shift, this incredible shift that you described so eloquently in the book about about these people who are judging you and your perception of them judging you, and how that really represented a major turnaround for you when they realized that you're one of them. And I think it's all about the we. Nobody's figured it out. Here I do all this nutrition and dietary recommendation, but I have to say, and I'm not holding back, that I recently got a continuous glucose monitor. And it revealed to me that I need to tighten down on my program a little bit. It's one thing to be saying all these things that I talk about in podcasts, but it's really quite another to be as transparent as we all can be. Look, we're all moving the ball down the field as best we can, but we're on the same team. And nobody's got it all figured out. I'm waiting to meet that person. Your husband's pretty darn close, God bless him.
And you are. I think he'd say that about you. I think he'd say that about you.
But that said, we're all trying to learn. And I think what's really important is the message that recommendations will change with time. It's what you want. And that we're all learning. We're all spending our entire life learning. When we finally give up and stop learning and just lock in to a mentality, oftentimes that will be a disservice to us. I mean, our ability to question is one of the few things that distances us from other animals. Yeah, the opposable thumb is kind of a cool thing to have. But there are a lot of things that define us as humans that are unique, provided we do our best to put them in context in terms of how we exploit those uniquenesses that we have as human beings.
No, I love that. You touched on a couple of things, and I just, one of the things you said that I love is we can recover from early trauma, whether it's childhood trauma, whether it happened at another time in your life, maybe you were assaulted, whatever it is. Now, what we're going through now, I mean, it's crazy, but you can recover from it. You're not stuck with it. I think that's the thing, is people think that, so many people think, well, that happened to me and it shaped my life. So talk to us about, we know that trauma can affect the brain. You just talked about that with the amygdala and how that shapes us. That flight or fight, especially. I know those of us who have been through a lot of early childhood trauma, I still have a tendency to get triggered and go into flight or fight really fast, mostly fight. But I have a tendency to do that really quickly. But how is it that we can change? You don't have to be stuck there. I mean, you talked about the prefrontal cortex, but is there something practical we can do right now? And I love that you touched on sleep.
Sure. Wayne Dyer once wrote about this, and what he said was to experience that fight or flight, to be with that fight or flight, and work with it, feel it. Deepak Chopra once talked about cigarette smoking, and he said, I'm not going to tell you not to smoke, but what I am going to tell you to do is next time it's time for a cigarette, put the phone down or whatever, turn off the TV, whatever is distracting you, take the cigarette, sit down, maybe go outside, and then smoke the cigarette. In other words, connect with that thing that we know is not necessarily salubrious, like Wayne Dyer said about these challenging situations. In our last book called Brainwash, I describe an event for me where I was I feel my pulse going up a little bit. I was in Costco, and a man was he was complaining that my wife hadn't finished shopping, but yet she still had the shopping cart in the lineup to check out. I mean, we were 3 people out. It wasn't a big deal. And he was going on and on. And when she finally came back with some groceries or whatever she had picked up, and he was saying this to me, and you could say what you want to me. I mean, it's fine. But when he started to verbally castigate my wife, I could feel it happening. I could feel it happening. Over years, you studied martial arts. There are various things we've learned to rein things in. But this tapped into something that it wasn't me, it was my wife. And it was just about to get ugly. And I remembered that thing about Wayne Dyer. I said, okay, I'm going to be with him. I'm going to try to experience this. And I took a deep breath, and I felt my rapid pulse, and I felt my sweating and the redness, I'm sure, that was developing in my face. And I just distanced myself from this individual, and it was a fight or flight. In this case, it would have been the fight option, not that there was an option. And instead engaged the experience, engaged those physiological changes that were taking place in my body, and said, well, isn't this cool? It's like it's like a 24-hour fast or whatever, where you get these kinds of experiences that you don't normally experience. So I went with it and turned my head, ignored him, and off we went. And I actually wrote about that. Again, letting people know that we all have our life challenges and day-to-day events that trigger previous events, that bring up previous paradigms,
right,
to which we are connected. Now, how do we distance ourselves from that connection? That is really the goal. These are early life influences that continue day to day to inform us. Why do we have that? Why does that even happen? It happens because it's a survival mechanism, whereby you were threatened at an early age when you went to a certain place or did a certain thing. Mm-hmm. And now it continues to inform you. You won't go to that place. You won't do that certain thing anymore. That's how we learn. That's how we didn't fall off the cliff the next time or whatever it was. The problem, of course, becomes now it is dysfunctional. That right. Things that are similar or may kindle that memory in a subconscious way continue to bring out our sympathetic nervous system activation, our subtle fight or flight response that tends to detract from our ability to be happy, to remain focused, to remain calm. And we now know that through the beauty of something called neuroplasticity, the ability that we have to wire into other things, we can reframe those previous experiences. Now, I will say there is a lot of work being done using hallucinogens to bring that about more quickly. I myself haven't experienced that. I haven't experienced, even tried it. Well, in my adult life anyway. But that said, I'm really watching that evolution of research because I think it's very powerful. I had the opportunity earlier this week to interview a fellow by the name of Wim Hof. Now, Wim Hof is involved in cold water exposure and a type of deep breathing that he believes is also a way to more aggressively and quickly get to that place where we have the ability then to distance ourselves from previous trauma. He openly, in his new book, describes the trauma that he experienced when his wife jumped off an 8-story building and committed suicide, leaving him with his children. And again, transparency, but describes how this cold water immersion coupled with this breathing technique is allowing him to recontextualize that experience so that it doesn't continue to inform him day to day. Now, that's a major traumatic event in his life. You have experienced, as you describe in your book, several traumatic events that might have pushed a lot of people a lot further down the rabbit hole, but you've persevered and dealt with it. And I think one of the beauties of your book is it shows that we do have this ability. Now, from my perspective, I'm thinking about brain wiring. We have the actual ability to rewire the brain in more positive ways to distance ourselves from those events. And meditation helps with that. Psychotherapy can help with that. But I would submit that what we're trying to do is structurally rebuild the brain. That activity requires the presence of a particular chemical called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. So if you want to enhance the ability to do this action through whatever technique you're going to use, and you describe how you did it, you want to enhance the way that it works through neuroplasticity. So that means having more DHA in your diet, which is from fish oil or algae. It means exercise every day, turns on the genes to make BDNF, whole coffee fruit concentrate, turmeric, lots of other things nutritionally, ketogenic diet, for example. All of these things, among a myriad of other things that they do, amplify our body's ability to make this miracle grow for our brains and allow then the work that we do in restructuring to work more efficiently and more permanently. Now, that's the short answer to your question. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, it's great. I mean, it's so helpful. And, I know a lot of people listening right now, watching right now that have experienced their own trauma. I know for me, going through early trauma, you start to not realize that it's not normal. You just think that this is what life is supposed to be like, because it is like that. So when you finally realize, oh, that's not how life is, you go through this moment of almost like, so I'm not normal, or there's shame around it. And then there's, for me, it was like, okay, I don't want to be stuck here. So I went on this journey. I went on this mission to try to figure out, is there a way to unwind this? Is there a way to get past all of this? And, I guess you call that resilience. I hope that's called resilience. And
perseverance.
Yeah. And perseverance. And so
as some people say.
I'm sorry?
Or perseverance. I've never,
right.
Either one. I think either one's good to go.
So we know that, it affects the brain. Can resilience be, are they the same thing? Are we talking about the same thing? Is resilience different? Are people either born resilient or are we talking about the same thing? Is that something that can be developed? your ability to bounce back?
The answer to both your questions is yes. There are, there is some developmental, inherited differences in that whole notion of resilience, number one. So yes. Number two, can it be developed? Yes, it can. I think you outlined some really important strategies to develop resilience. I would say that for many years I've been, so what is resilience, first of all? It's the ability to deal with various types of different stressors and come out ahead. Now, these can be environmental, they can be bacterial, viral, they can infectious, they can be psychological, they can be physiological in terms of parameters, low blood sugar, hypoxia, you name it. So resilience is the ability to bounce back when challenged by whatever that particular stress is involved here. I think from my perspective, I've always said that diversity breeds resilience. And I'm going to amplify that just a little bit for you. I began using that terminology when I was talking about the gut bacteria. And because we know that having a more diverse array of bacteria allows you to be able to confront various life stresses, be they toxic, be they environmental, which is often toxic. So the more diverse bacteria. And I was actually having this conversation with an individual who runs a not-for-profit involved in the Amazon. What's the segue here? He said it's the diversity of the organisms living in the Amazon that allows it to be resilient to this incredible climate change that we are seeing. So in the context of what you and I are talking about today, I think diversity of tools in the toolkit, many of which you described, is what moving forward allows us to be resilient to the future traumas of our lives, such that they can be dealt with, such that they do not necessarily activate a previous engram or experience that continues to run in the background. So these are the types of tools, the more diverse they are, the more we are able to incorporate more tools in our toolkit, whether it's exercise to amplify BDNF or therapy or practicing gratitude, practicing compassion on a daily basis, keeping a gratitude journal. These are all toolboxes then that can allow us to be more resilient in the face of future events.
I like that. So diversity. So try a whole bunch of different things that are helpful, a lot of positive tools, which is sort of what we talk about on our podcast. It's what you talk about in your books. It's what we're all trying to promote, especially during this time. We talk about the four circles: the biological, the psychological, the social, the spiritual, and trying to keep those in balance. And they don't have to be long, hard things, but do something every day to work those.
That's right. And until we get them under control and until we recontextualize these influences in our activity, the more it bleeds out to other people. In fact, there's a quote in your book. I think I dog-eared it. Hang on a sec. Give me a second here. I'm going to read this quote from your book. Ready? If you never heal from what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you. And we've all done that. We've all taken it out on others inappropriately. People who, look at you like, what did I do to deserve this?
Right.
And when you understand that, I think it helps you in your understanding about other people's actions toward you that may not necessarily be directed at you.
Yeah, they may have nothing to do with you.
Absolutely. You just, for whatever reason, a pattern was triggered in that person and you're right there and you receive it. When you understand that that is being informed by something that went on long before you were in the equation, then you can take a deep breath, say, this is making me feel a certain way. Let's deal with it. Let's work with it. And it allows you to be so much more accepting of others as opposed to being accusatory and wanting to storm out of the room because of something that just happened.
Oh, I'm so grateful for that. I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you are an incredibly busy person, but you are so generous and so gracious with your time to join us and give people a little bit of hope right now during this, challenging time. But, one thing I learned, and I learned it from hanging out with, my mentors like you, is find the opportunity in what's going on. So find the opportunity. So rephrase your questions and ask better questions. And, when you're faced with something challenging, it's like, what do I get to do? What can I do? As opposed to, oh no, this is the end of the world. It's like, what is the opportunity in this situation? And that's just an important thing I've learned.
I am actually reading The Telomere Effect right now because I'm interviewing Dr. Appel in a couple of weeks, and how interesting it is that reframing things to look at them as a challenge as opposed to a threat is associated with preservation of your telomeres. I mean,
oh, interesting. So you live longer.
Well, it translates to that. So, that's what we'll be talking about. But anyway, I want to thank you for having me today. I always enjoy spending time with you and seeing you. And someday, soon, it'll be in real life. So this is
Can't
great.
wait. We're going to be opening a clinic not too far from you, so we're gonna make that happen.
Oh, I'll be there for the ribbon cutting.
All right. Thanks so much, Doc.
Talk to you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.